Hello and welcome to Infinity Live, the overbooked, undercooked, off the hook, read a book, breakfast nook, Captain Hook, catch the crook, pawn to rook. The only Fremen word we know is sook. Tabletop gaming podcast. I hope you enjoyed all that delightful and ear-splitting rhyming. I am William T. Thrasher. With me, as always, is Brandon Cass. And tonight we have two special guests with us. We have, from the wild lands of Australia, our good buddy Heath.
How you doing?
Yep. And also coming to us from a soundless vortex, friend of the show, former co-host, and returning co-host, Richard T. Balsley. And that was his message from the soundless void. V for victory! Anyway, tonight our topic is Go to Hell, adventuring in the afterlife, whatever that afterlife may be. But before we do that, we do have some news we want to share with you. Brendan, what is going on with our website, d-infinity.net?
As always, good things. We've got more monsters from Chris Van Deelen, inspired by sci-fi movies, so those B movies that you catch on the Sci-Fi Channel. My favorite would have to be the Sharktopus, just because it's such a ridiculous concept. You know, half shark, half octopus. It's like Jaws meets a hentai porno or something like that. We've also got a fun article from Eric Lee, that's Dr. Eric Lee, about where little adventurers come from. And for those of you who likes to think about the concept of adventuring and how that might actually work in the real world, he goes in depth about how altruism and heroism might actually be naturally selected for in a population. So it's a little bit more sophisticated, but also a good read, no doubt. And this is going to tie into the things that Skirmisher has been doing recently. There is an announcement for the release of Little Orc Wars. We've expanded it, we've revised it, and you can get it in print. So that's all very exciting. That is what we have up on the D-Infinity website right now.
Excellent. And some of you may notice the very, very, very conspicuous absence of Mike Jolly Varhola. Unfortunately, he failed a fortitude save, and he is out of commission for tonight. So he will not be filling you in on what's going on with our co-publisher, Skirmisher, so the duty falls to me. And we've got a few things going on with Skirmisher. First and foremost, I believe we mentioned this last week, we have our H.G. Wells War Game Bundle. That bundle is still available. It's $12.73. You get the reprint of H.G. Wells' Little Wars, one of the first war games ever written, his follow-up Floor Games, and also Little Orc Wars, which Brendan just mentioned. So there's lots of good books in there. The other big piece of news, for those of you who follow Mutant Future and are fans of post-apocalyptic gaming, the new volume of Wisdom of the Wastelands has just come out, and it is volume 40, or sorry, it's issue 40, New Races. It's all new mutant races and mutant species to introduce to your game. So if you like that kind of post-apocalyptic gaming, if you like those Gamma World retro clones, then that's something you'll probably want to check out. And also, speaking of which, we just wanted to give a shout out to the blog Swords and Stitchery, which is a sort of as they describe it, the old-time sewing table and tabletop RPG blog. And they've actually been posting a lot of things related to D-Infinity. Particularly, they've just posted a review of Volume 40 of Wisdoms of the Wasteland, which is pretty cool. We'll be putting a link up to that a little bit later. And Heath, you had a bit of information you wanted to share with our viewers.
Yeah, just promoting my new Facebook page, the Antipodean D20. All of the Facebook pages that I seem to like to do with gaming, predominantly in the US, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but just trying to provide a platform for some of the local guys here, not necessarily in my own state, but just in big old down under, because I know we do have a wealth of creativity, and it's I just wanted to provide a platform for it. So my own stuff and stuff that's either impressed or inspired me, actually, of which a collaboration with your good selves on the up-and-coming Lives of Coast publication, which, if Mike was here, would probably go on a 98-minute dissertation on. I won't do that. I'll leave that for him. But keep watch, stay tuned, and I mean, I'm just excited being part of it. So I can only imagine what people are going to be like when they actually get their hands on the published result.
Very cool. And at this point, I would ask Richard if there's anything he wanted to address before going to the main topic. But Richard has already been called into the audient void.
That's
First
right.
word sounds like. All right, so I guess it's about time to get into our main topic, adventuring in the afterlife. So before we go into questions and comments and all the juicy little nuggets we have prepared, I guess we'll just each give our general impression of gaming in the afterlife. And from my own experience, I find this is something that doesn't happen nearly enough for my tastes. A substantial part of virtually all the world's mythologies and religious traditions and everything we take inspiration from for our games have to do with what happens to you after you die. And in tabletop role-playing games, particularly classic dungeon crawl games where it is entirely possible to die and come back, the afterlife is often not really addressed. It's just offhandedly your soul just kind of goes into a vague cosmic storage bin until the priests are ready to resurrect you to continue the adventures.
Yeah.
And I really think that's giving the afterlife, short shrift. When you go on to the afterlife, you have a chance to meet dead relatives and ancient heroes and the gods themselves, and that just brings up so much story potential that I really love to see plundered at the gaming table. How about you, Brendan?
Well, there's a lot of stuff I can talk about on this subject because it's a fun one. But since we're talking about generalities right now, I would say that if you're going to, and when I adventure in the afterlife, or if you're going to adventure in the afterlife, people have a lot of preconceptions, especially about hell, right? Fire and brimstone and torture in really mundane varieties. People chained up, getting whipped, and stuff like that. It's probably not nearly off the wall enough. Physical pain and physical discomfort is probably not nearly as uncomfortable as some of the mental anguish that you might be able to put someone through. As horrible as that sounds. But hell, because it's not actually a physical plane, or maybe it is in your world, but I think you're missing an opportunity there. Hell as a non-physical plane has the opportunity for you to go into like the metaphysical, the metaphorical, and really get crazy with the way people perceive things in a way that, and since we're talking about hell and we're not talking about heaven here, it's got to be nasty. It's got to be something that's not good, right? So get into people's heads and play with the way that they perceive things. And make it a really uncomfortable experience for them. That's when you're really starting to get into what hell could be. Don't just draw the line at fire. Diablo works as a video game because you've got graphics. That's all you've got. When you've got RPGs, you can really start to get people right in the feelings, make them make really terrible decisions in order to, save themselves or save somebody else they care about. But it's all of it is just, the whole point of hell is to drag people through the mud. And if you're actually there permanently, you're just being dragged through the mud the whole time. That's how I feel about hell just in general.
It reminds me of an early episode of The Simpsons where Bart Simpson, they're learning about hell in Sunday school, and Bart Simpson saying, well, isn't it just like a hot tub and you'll just get used to the heat eventually?
Right.
And the teacher says, no, Bart, you don't. And admittedly, go to hell isn't the title of this episode, but we're not going to limit ourselves to just the bad afterlives. We can talk about the good afterlives and the neutral afterlives as well. Although certainly, depending on your attitude, all the fun stuff can be happening in hell. So I'm sure there's a lot to talk about there. How about you, Heath? Just general
I'd call
impressions.
bullshit on that, by the way, Will. So if you bring that up, I'm going to have to call bullshit on that. But yeah, you go ahead, Heath.
That's, I was almost, hang on, this is getting interesting. I'll watch. Going to hell. When I first saw you guys post this as the theme, I immediately went to one of my favorite sci-fi shows of the 80s, Red Dwarf.
Oh,
when
yeah.
Holly said, John Paul Sartre said, "Hell is being locked forever in a room with your friends," which was retorted, Holly, all of his mates were French. But that's nothing against the French, but yeah, I love my friends dearly, but yeah, I couldn't spend forever locked in a room with them. No way, no way. But getting back to the gaming topic, I suppose you've got to look at what your definition of hell is. We played a rather interesting game a few years ago where it was an evil campaign, and the anti-paladin actually died and got sent to heaven, and we had to go rescue him. So there's a bit of a twist on that. I remember we played a cyberpunk game where our netrunner was plugged in, and I can't remember the specifics of it, but his body was killed. For some reason, his mind uploaded to the net, so he was effectively a ghost in the machine. So that was his afterlife.
Ghost in the shell.
Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell. Yeah, sorry, Ghost in the Machine. That was like I think the inspiration we got from it was from Johnny Mnemonic, where the Swiss the Ghost in the Machine was the Swiss persona of one of the founders of where the medicine for the black shakes coming from. I can't remember, but that's where Ghost in the Machine. Yeah, Ghost in the Shell, Ghost in the Machine. Potato.
Hey, Richard has returned to us. Richard, do you have any general comments about gaming in the afterlife? Or any hand gestures about gaming in the afterlife? Perhaps a series of blinks that spell out something in Morse code.
Okay, does this work?
Yeah.
Yes!
Oh, there we go.
Awesome.
Okay, sorry about that. I haven't used the external mic, so... well, one of my favorite settings is Planescape, and that's pretty much set in the afterlife.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's one of it's one of my favorite settings for multiple reasons. One is because you have the different philosophies of what heaven and hell is supposed to look like, and I find that pretty intriguing, especially when in light of things like an episode of Twilight Zone where this guy. He was a gangster. He ends up passing away from like getting hit by a bus or something, and he gets to smoke cigars every night. There's beautiful women. He goes to the casino and he wins at the roulette game and everything else. And he keeps doing this day in and day out. And after a while, he gets tired of it. Right?
It's just like the Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, and he talks about the guy he thinks is his guardian angel. He's like, I don't get it. I thought this was heaven. Well, why isn't this any fun anymore? And the guy turns to him and says, "Who said this was heaven?"
Oh yeah, and then Rod Serling comes out and gives his closing thoughts, and then we cut to a cigarette commercial. All right, we'll go ahead and get into our questions and comments from our viewers. And first one comes from Clint Staples, friend of the show, who wants to know, what does hell look like in your games? Fire and brimstone, zombies central, endless ennui? For me, it depends on the type of game. I love... Just in general, I love blasted wastelands full of weird, twisted rocks, like you turned a volcano inside out. I just generally like that look, and then just a perpetually overcast orange sky. But that's just a general guideline. Everything else, it really depends on the cosmology of the world. If I'm running the space opera Fading Suns, well, their version of hell is cold. Their version of hell exists in the void between stars. So it's just an icy, dark place where you're isolated from all stimuli, except for the twinkling stars you will never ever be able to get close to. Although one of my favorite hells is in Werewolf the Apocalypse. There is a spiritual realm called Erebus, which is the werewolf hell, and it's generally kind of what you would expect from like a classic Judeo-Christian hell, where it's rocks and these demon werewolves with pitchforks and hooks. But the main thing that makes it different is that there's no fire in Erebus. There are rivers and volcanoes of molten silver. which is, of course, the werewolf's one weakness. And the demon werewolves with the hooks, they're always trying to hook into you and drown you in molten silver, and that's the horrible punishment. Although one key difference between Erebus and a lot of other sort of hell realms is werewolves reincarnate, so your time in Erebus is temporary. Eventually, the molten silver purifies your soul, and you fall into this lake of crystal clear water that heals your burns, and then you get reincarnated, and that's very cool. How about you, Brendan? What does hell look like for you?
Well, hell tends to look like something different to the person experiencing it. I tend to be of the impression and I'm actually starting to reread Dante's Inferno, and I guess he might start to agree with me. It's tailored to the individual to make sure that the experience is fitting to what you were in life and also miserable for you. And so Dante's circles are also somewhat tailored to the type of person that you were in life. In some cases, you end up being submerged mostly in fecal matter, or people walk on your faces and stuff like that. So, but that makes it kind of difficult for a gaming session, I admit, because then you'd have to tailor the experience in hell to each individual, and what it looks like is going to be selected for each individual. So what I end up doing most of the time is picking a common thread, something that I can say everyone in the party is really against or would be really unhappy about, and then sort of sprinkle a little bit of individuality in there, maybe with the illusions that they interact with, or otherwise. But a lot of times, hell is mostly in your head, and whereas in your werewolf version of hell, if you can run away from a demon with a hook that wants to pull you into the river of silver, if such a thing is possible, if you're really good at running away, you might be able to pull it off. In my hells, you tend to not be able to game hell. You can't game hell as a system unless you are somehow more clever than the entity that's punishing you. So you have to be really smart, or there has to be somebody gunning for you on the outside who might be able to otherwise influence it. But that's getting into how you might get out of hell, and not necessarily what it looks like. So it can look like really anything. If you really hate children, hell is being stuck in kindergarten. And I don't know why I said children. But, yeah, I would say that's my answer.
How about you, Heath? What does your hell look like?
Just going on what Brendan said, yeah, as the proud father of a 2-year-old, there's like a kids group here in Australia that I really don't like. And when I go and pick up my boy on the day that I have to, they've no doubt got their DVD or CD or something on, and the song gets stuck in my head for a good 4 days afterwards.
Is it a song about fruit salad and how it is yummy yummy?
Possibly one of them.
I did it, didn't I? I didn't mean to break, Heath.
No, that's all right. No, again, quickly touching on what Brendan said about tailored to different people. It's like that joke about the guy being sent to hell, and we're going to go over here and chain you up and do this and bamboo under the fingernails and all the rest of it. And they walk past this pit of lawyers, and there's all these scantily clad women sitting around these lawyers, and the guy says, "Well, what's the deal with that?" And the demon says, "It's not you to judge how we torture those poor girls."
Oh, wow. How about you, Richard?
Well, for me, I think hell is essentially empty in a lot of ways, because the lack of stimulation is worse than any form of stimulation. I mean, that's the ultimate torture, is the fact that you have nothing. There is absolutely nothing. Boredom is I know Brendan mentioned the thing with children, but if you think about it, what's worse than death for little kids? It's being bored. Right? The thing that they hate the most is having nothing to do. And if you're left to your own devices with absolutely nothing around, that's pretty much what it is. So it's kind of basically waiting for Godot.
Now, so what if you have an imagination and you just imagine a better play to be trapped in?
Then, well, they did that in one of the installments for the was it some trilogy for Planescape. I can't remember the title of it, but there was one layer of the Abyss that was nothing but passion plays, and everybody starred in their own passion play.
Very cool. Before we go to our next reader question, something. Oh yes, Heath.
Sorry, I just had a thought. I remember just very quickly you're saying about what hell in gaming looks like. I remember we had to do something along the lines of go and rescue someone who had died in hell, and what it ended up being is this grey clouded sky, and hell was like an endless cemetery, like an endless necropolis. With like a labyrinthine, poison river riddled underlevel, and it's just nothing but mausoleums as far as the eye could see, with no clear map or direction of how the rows were set out. And we actually had to find the one that he was stashed in. But I understand that a lot of the Swords of Cost necropolis takes place in a necropolis. Funny enough.
Oh, indeed. But before we get into our next viewer question, something I did want to ask you guys: what is your favorite tabletop gaming source book that deals with the afterlife or hell? And for me, it would have to be the 1000 Hells source book for Kindred of the East, which was the Asian-themed spin-off of Vampire the Masquerade. It's just a guidebook to this realm that is made up of thousands of tiny hells. Hell is very personalized, very individualized, and this is the realm that your vampires go to before rising from the dead as part of the game's cosmology. And the game's got some really cool hells. There's the hell of upside down sinners, where you're chained upside down beneath the surface of a lake and are just sort of drowning forever. There's the hell
No,
of
that's Guantanamo, Will.
one could make the case, indeed. There's the hell of wind and shadow, where it's a realm of complete darkness, and the only weather it has is intense wind, which chips off flakes of stone from the terrain that constantly burrow into your face. And these are just the major hells. There's a great list of just 20 minor hells with very brief descriptions, which are everything from the hell of one meal, where you can only eat this one meal for all of eternity, and the hell of the eternally violated spouse, where all you can do is sit idly by and watch the person that you married be sexually interfered with by the realm's inhabitants. And it's just chock full of just really cool atmospheric hells and tortures for sinners that you wouldn't immediately think of. Brandon, what's your favorite hell source book?
Well, let me think. So, source books that you can pick up off the shelf right away. There was a D20 source book. I think it was Book of Vile Darkness, I think it was called. That was the first one I had. It wasn't a particularly good source book, but since you asked me about source books, that's probably the one I would go to. Then, as I got a little bit older, I started writing this stuff myself, and I found that literature ended up doing me a lot more good, because good hell, again, it's situational. So I have to stick to my guns here. I like to tailor my hells to the people who are playing. If it's in a source book already, either the authors are really, really good at predicting the people that I play with, or you know, I'm not that creative. So yeah, I tend to tailor things. So I find that, you know, hell-related movies are good if you're looking for imagery. Obviously, you know, I talked about Dante. You can't really go wrong with that. It's a classic. And, you know, base your imagery off of that. And then, you know, also movies and books that are about nightmares. Nightmares I find are really, really close to hell, except the only difference is that in hell the consequences are real, and in nightmares the consequences are just something you wake up from. And also, I mean, Richard probably knows what his favorite one is, seeing as he wrote Cosmos Builder, right?
Yes,
Well, I
Richard.
wouldn't actually go with that one. The choice I would go with is.
Wait, hold on, Richard. I'm not going to keep you from answering your question here. You're going to tell me that your favorite Afterlife source book is not the one you wrote.
Well, yeah, because mine is more of a guidebook. It doesn't really give you anything.
That's perfect. Then. All right, fine.
I'm just saying.
Fine. It's the one Mike likes to use. Okay, Richard? Mike likes your Cosmos Source Builder as a guide to the afterlife.
I didn't say I don't like my own work. I'm just saying that the book that I like in terms of like describing hellish things is the Player's Guide to Shadow for Wraith, the Oblivion.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to get dark, that's the book to go to.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean that. I mean, Wraith the Oblivion. That's an entire game about the afterlife. Oh man, and
I mean the shadow and that, like the way it works is, oh my god, it's one of the best done systems where you constantly have somebody trying to undermine you, and it's really just yourself.
yeah, well, I mean that's the great thing about Wraith is hell is other players. If you're using the Shadow Guide system, every player is working against every other player around the table through the shadows, and yet it works. How about you, Heath? What's your favorite hell-based source book?
Given that I haven't had too much contact with many actual source books rather than just actual like literary sources in the way of movies and TV shows and that sort of thing, I mean, Book of Vile Darkness yet, with no disrespect to anyone in the D&D world, like it wasn't as horrific as what I thought it was going to be with a title like that, but like, when you think Vile Darkness, you can conjure up all sorts of mental nastiness. And I suppose to make sure, harking back to that funny article about what D20 is and devil worship and that back in the 80s, I'm sure putting out that book, they didn't want to sort of make it too dark, otherwise, parents would be forbidding sales all over the place.
What is it that early versions of D&D world, they used Beelzebub instead of the devil because they didn't want to piss off the Bible thumpers? Is that what they used? Yeah. They didn't have the devil. They wouldn't use the devil, but I think they had Beelzebub. That was as far as they would go.
Yeah. I haven't, like, some of the gaming systems that have a lot more in depth to do with, like, the afterlife and hell and that sort of thing. Your White Wolf and Vampire and that sort of thing. But yeah, Vile Darkness was the closest I came to actually playing anything like that. And for me, it's more literary sort of sources like movies. Ninth Gate, From Hell, even that wacky Jennifer Lopez movie, The Cell, when they go into the mind of that was some strange stuff, but it held you captivated. One that I saw, and it's not exactly a horrific film, but just more the way they've thought it out, and was the Robin Williams movie What Dreams May Come. I don't know whether you guys have seen that or not, when he has to go and find his wife who's meant to be in hell or in limbo because she took her own life. That conjured up some it was very thought-provoking, but I guess it's just a different look on what hell could be. Going back to what Brendan was saying about everyone's got different. Everyone should have a different hell. My hell's not exactly the same as what your hell would be, but it's hell nonetheless.
Well, our next question comes from Richard Penwarden, who wants to know, I'd like to know, we've talked about bringing people back from the afterlife, but he'd like to know what else we have allowed to be brought back from the environment of the afterlife, and what happens when it reaches the mortal world, if anything. And This is actually really, really cool because a lot of people, kind of expect, and in a realm of angels and demons and Valkyries and whatnot, that there's going to be powerful stuff lying around. For me, it'll generally depend on what's being taken and why. If a player just grabs something thinking that once it gets back to the prime material plane, it's going to be a ridiculously powerful relic, I'm not going to let much happen with it when it comes back. That being said, I have a few things to come back. Talking about the werewolf hell Erebus, there was a character who had this. He had a combat knife, and when he had gone on a quest into Erebus, just for shits and giggles, he dipped the blade of his combat knife into the river of molten silver just to see what would happen. I thought, well, that's cool. So when he left Erebus, he discovered that not only did his weapon count as a silver weapon, but it did a little bit more damage towards anything that werewolves would consider evil or deserving of the punishments of Erebus. Another thing we did, we had. We had a game where the characters were at the gates of heaven, and they weren't being allowed in. This angel was explaining to them why they weren't being allowed in, and there a lot of role playing happened. But the short of it is that they got what they needed, and they were ready to leave. And the angel drops the back off an earth and flies away. And I just happened to mention that when the angel zaps back to heaven, he leaves a trail, a little trail of feathers in his wake. Well, they decide to gather up the angel feathers. And, not wanting to be too overpowered, it just decided that each angel feather functioned as a maxed out version of holy water. But like holy water, once you use it, it's gone. And, just kind of, it made an interesting resource. So if you can keep, when they bring something back, as long as they're bringing something back for interesting reasons, and as long as you can come up with an interesting use for that item, I think anything goes. How about you, Brendan?
Okay, so in order to bring something back from hell, generally my players can't be dead. We're talking more along the lines of the story of Persephone, right? Where our hero goes into Hades, or hell, and tries to get Persephone back, but he's there physically, right? He pays Charon to take him across the river Styx. He does the whole thing. He's not actually dead. He's there physically. When I tend to deal with death in the afterlife, if you end up in the afterlife, that's your spirit leaving your body, right? So when your spirit goes, so if you're dead, the sort of things that you could bring back are the things that your spirit might be able to bring back. It starts to get really ambiguous and tricky because we're talking about what is a soul and so on. Part of it, I think, is your collective consciousness, right? So the sort of things a dead person might bring back, and how terrible or good they might be, it might be knowledge that you might have gained beyond the pale, right? The sorts of things that might be talking to you in the afterlife might affect you mentally, might affect your psyche. We've got some good mythos tie-in here. Might make you lose your mind, might make you think that you've got a new mission when you come back that may or may not be true. Whatever talked to you when you were dead might have been lying just to get into your head. So that's what a dead person might bring back. Now, if you have a gate spell, and you physically go to a hell plane or an afterlife plane and you bring something back, well, yeah, odds are it's going to be something, celestial or fiendish or something, evil, imbued with some of the essence of that place. And odds are it's going to bring whatever that taint is back with you. So things that normally might not hang out in a certain area might start to congregate there because they can smell it, maybe because you use it, certain things have a greater effect on you. Maybe if you use it, you have a greater effect. So like Will said, you have a greater effect on other things. So it really depends why you went to the afterlife and why you came back. If you died, knowledge. If you went there, it could be anything. A monster might follow you through, and you might not have seen it. You might have brought a relic back, things like that.
How about you, Heath?
One of the biggest things, and I think Brendan sort of touched on that, saying taint, was apart from XP or any experience or character points of that from any encounters there, even the dead guy can bring back XP, I dare say. It might just lose a ton of it being brought back, but he's going to get some, or she's going to get some anyway. In the games that I've played where we've come back from hell with the person that we've rescued with something, it's always had a taint, and that's what Brandon was saying. You rock up with something minor, like maybe someone's grabbed like a whole bunch of brimstone on there. It's going to have a very small taint. Maybe you go into a town where there's a paladin. He's going to pick up on that. Something bigger. Maybe you've kicked the ass of someone in hell who's dropped his.
Don't talk about taints when you're talking about asses.
Wah,
Hey,
wah.
I've got a 2-year-old. I can tell you about some taint. But
oh God! Stop!
one of,
All right.
one of the
Your
guys,
paladin. Go back to the paladin.
one of the guys wanted to bring back this demon's dagger that he dropped. And it happened to be, long sword size for the guy. Brought it back, and he was I remember you sure you want to bring this back? Yeah. How cool is this trophy? I can smite things with it. It was cool. We turn up, bang, not a satyr. What's the like an archon? An angel appears, going, "I'll have that, thanks." They're going, not having it, because it had the evil taint to it, and it was unbalancing. Material plane, heaven, hell. It was an unbalance.
That's actually pretty cool. And actually, this is something I wanted to bring up related to this, especially if you're talking about, classic tabletop role-playing like D&D and Pathfinder and whatnot. So here's a question for you guys as GMs. If you've got a cleric or a paladin in the party, is bringing an object back from hell an out-of-alignment act? Is that an inherently evil act in the alignment cosmology?
I'll jump right into it. Fantasy settings do tend to have that concept of a heaven and hell just being inhabited by a certain group of creatures. It's like a different state, like Texas or New York or whatever, kind of like. So in New York you've got all your demons. I don't know, Texas, I don't know what lives there. But anyway, the point is.
Mike's live there.
Mike lives there. So Texas is a state. I don't know. I don't know. Lost my train of thought. Where was I going with this? So would taking something from that place be evil? I wouldn't say necessarily right away that it should necessarily be evil, but there are cursed items. Even in D20, there are cursed items that change your alignment to evil. Where do you think those things come from? If hell as a plane is just a creature where evil exists, that's where evil comes from, then the things there are evil, and if you take that with you, you become evil. You are evil not necessarily because you took it, but because you took it, you're evil, right? The thing itself the act makes you evil, not because necessarily the act itself is evil, because you're just taking a thing from one place to another. That's a pretty benign activity, but you took an evil thing with you to a neutral ground. Well, it needs a repository, something to fill up, and it's going to fill up as much as it possibly can, depending on how strong it is. You become evil because of that, even though you just did something that normally wouldn't be that big of a deal. That's how I look at it.
Heath, did you want to weigh in on the alignment issue?
Yeah, I was just gonna follow up. If someone brought something back evil and they started getting sort of evil because of it, would you still do that if they were bringing it back to destroy, to prevent more evil?
Kind of like a One Ring situation.
Yeah, but you're okay. So I get that. Now, if you found your one ring on Earth, and it'll still try to make you evil, right? And then you destroy it.
Friday was a lot different at the end of what it was at the start, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There was definitely an alignment shift there.
Yeah, there was an alignment shift. It'll still try to make you evil. The One Ring is a very good example. And then you destroy it, its influence is gone, and hopefully you recover, and it wasn't permanent damage. But we're not taking the One Ring from hell. If you had, then why are you bringing it from hell? Destroying an item that you brought out of hell is pointless, unless it's something artificial to hell and somehow artificially augments the evilness of hell. Then you might want to do that. Let's say someone on Earth or in your physical plane goes to hell, builds something that makes hell even worse somehow. Then you might want to destroy that. That's different. If you take something from hell, it's like taking a bucket of water from the ocean and dumping on the ground and saying, ah, I made the ocean less oceany. There's
Brendan, it's funny you mentioned that, because I did a Quest and a Fantasy campaign ages ago,
Yeah.
where the whole premise was there was this crown meant to be worn by the King of Hell, and the King of Hell was betrayed, and the crown was taken by another demon. And what it turns out is that the crown lets you control the demons in hell, and hell was getting too organized. So the adventurers were taken to steal the crown of the King of Hell and take it to the only place where it could be destroyed, which were the original fires of creation. That was the only heat hot enough to melt this thing down. And the whole time, hell is getting more chaotic and disorganized the further the object gets away from that realm.
That's pretty cool.
And so, yeah. But of course,
a good point. I always think of hell as lawful, because you make deals with the devil, and there are certain rules, like if you commit such and such a sin, and this is again more Dante speaking, you commit such and such a sin, you get such and such a penalty. That's a very lawful concept. So it's evil, but if we're talking like traditional D&D alignments, it's definitely like a lawful evil construct to me. So it's interesting that you mentioned that it was too organized. I always see hell as a very like it's an office building. It's a tall bureaucratic office building where you've got a bunch of people filing paperwork. It's like, all right, you're this guy, you're in this list. Okay, let me go to my filing cabinet. Yep, this is the punishment you get. Go, right? So it's interesting that you make it that you said it was getting more and more chaotic, because to me, I'm not even sure what a chaotic hell would look like.
Don't forget your TPS report.
No, that's right.
Well, that essentially, like in this campaign, the demons, would because demons. The only reason demons were answering to any kind of central authority was because this relic compelled them to.
Mm-hmm.
Once that relic was gone, then they all just started going at each other's throats, and were spending more time going after each other than sinners and whatnot. But it's funny you mentioned that, because there's a great book by Terry Pratchett called Eric. It's one of the Discworld books. And it's a weird retelling of Faust, and that's one of the notions, is that their hell is a very bureaucratic place. The hell is kind of depicted kind of like the British civil service, and all the demons are sort of jockeying for like tenured positions.
Yeah.
And as a result, it's not too bad of a place to be, because you can kind of, if you've got to push a boulder uphill, well, that's fine. The demon who makes sure you do that's going to get a lunch break, and that's when you get to take time off too, because nobody's watching you. It's a very fun novel.
Yeah.
Also, having a road going into hell which is literally paved with good intentions. Every brick on that road it has etched on it a good intention, such as we did it for the children, or we had to destroy the village in order to save it.
Right.
Or it was for the greater good. There's a lot of it was for the greater good bricks on that road.
I like that. That's clever.
That's fun to play around
symbolism's
with.
a big one. You get you get to be super metaphorical, because you don't have to obey any natural laws. So take your puns and make them real. That's always a fun one.
Oh, indeed. And actually, that was another thing that happened in a game I ran, where the players had to take a side trip into hell. They had this demonic. To make sure that they weren't just assaulted by the legions of hell at all times, they had this demon native guide, but he was still a torture demon. And so one of the running gags was the demon could constantly change the environment they were in to be the environment they least wanted to be in. So, like, when the characters started, when like the elf and dwarf characters started using their low light vision, he suddenly made it high noon, because that's just his nature. And the moment the moment one of the characters took off their boots got destroyed and they were just down to their socks, that's when the floor became covered with sharp little rocks. It was really it was tremendous fun. Now, Heath, you had a question that you had actually posted right before the show started, with that photo from Aladdin.
Yeah.
You see, any GM that allows a character back from the gates of hell, do you have any provos or hidden extras? And I actually, yes, but that's often because in a lot of my games, if you're taking a person out of an afterlife, any afterlife, you often have to cut a deal with whatever's in charge of that afterlife. So, like in the case of hell, maybe you actually do have to make an agreement with, a demonic jailer to get this soul out. Or if you're getting someone out of heaven or an equivalent realm, the soul departing has to make some sort of solemn pledge, which will be cosmically enforced. And in most of those cases, you'll know what you'll know what the provo is, and you'll know what the consequence is, and you can negotiate that in the moment. But once you get out of that realm, then it's set in stone, and it is going to affect the game from that point forward. And of course, beyond that, there's always the old standby of having an evil spirit follow them out and haunt them. Because I'm sure there's other people who want to leave those. How about you, Brendan?
Refresh me on the question again. I was so enthralled with your answer that I lost it.
When a GM allows a character back from the gates of hell,
Yeah.
Are there any provisos or hidden extras?
Oh, well, I think any good DM would do that. That's a huge opportunity there. It's not black letter in a lot of spells. A lot of times you're back without a hitch, but that's very crunchy, very mechanical. It makes it feel like a video game. So there should at least be some sort of something. Even if it's a favor that somebody's asking for from beyond, they're just saying, talk to such and such a person. They're still alive. I really wanted to apologize for such a thing. It's what's torturing me right now is that I never got a chance to do that. So they're still dead, they're still suffering, but at least maybe you might get to talk to them. That's an opportunity for you to work in a fun adventure hook, right? So you go talk to that person, and they're like, oh, well, it's funny you mentioned that because this is the situation I'm in now. And if you're committed to the NPC you met while you were dead, you might be committed to this NPC who's still living, who's asking for further help. So, yes. I always take that opportunity to keep that ace in my back pocket. Oh, remember when you were dead? Yeah. It keeps things fresh, it keeps things interesting, and it reminds people that even though whatever they have down on their character sheet may make it look like the consequences for something are minimal, it keeps players on their toes because they never really know what the full extent of the consequences that they're going to run into are. Because you never want players getting too meta. Like, oh, we have the 1,000 gold necessary to resurrect this guy. We'll just send him in by himself. It's what tactically makes sense. Since there's limited consequences, we don't really worry about it. He goes, we resurrect him later, no big deal. Now, if they're not actually sure what's going to happen to them, they might not do that.
It's funny you mentioned having the gold bank to resurrect someone. This was like ages ago when I first started gaming. The party had kind of a resurrection fund in case any characters need to be raised. And there was this one time there was this dungeon that we had to go into, and just for a number of reasons, we didn't have anybody who could detect traps, and everybody was convinced there were going to be traps in there. So the solution to the trap problem was one of the characters volunteered to go in, but they had this ropes tied all around them, and they just went barging into the dungeon in the hopes that they would trigger all the traps, and if the traps killed them, they could just pull the corpse out. Get them resurrected without risking triggering any further traps.
That is so horribly Munchkin that, yes, that dead player would not come back a completely whole person in whatever meaning of that you wanna imagine.
And actually, related to all this, just I'd like to talk about other consequences for characters coming back from the dead, because I feel like in a lot of games the process of coming back from the dead is far too easy, far too cut and dry. That's why when I'm running a game where characters can come back from the dead, the resurrection spell does require a sojourn in the afterlife to guide the person back. But I like it when there are some consequences. I mean, if anyone was a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, in the last episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer on the WB, Buffy dies, and then when they got those extra seasons on the UPN or wherever, and Buffy gets resurrected, but Buffy is different afterwards. She's depressed. She's doing dangerous things that could get her killed. And in the musical episode, we find out the reason she's so depressed is she was in heaven, standing among the saints and all the good people and at the right hand of God, and being pulled back from that was the most traumatic, dispiriting thing that could happen to somebody. So she was trying to get herself killed because she wanted to go back to that. And that was just that was something that I personally had never seen before.
I totally forgot about that. I did end up watching, I think, that story arc at one point, and that was a good point. Yeah, it's all up here, right? The things that you learn about after you die are probably well beyond the sorts of things that you experience as a regular human being. I mean, we have drugs nowadays, right, that will alter your brain chemistry to the point where it will change who you are as a human being. Now imagine dying and having the secrets of the universe revealed to you in death, and then having to come back from that. Maybe you as a living human being can't actually wrap your head around that as a living. I've seen that one done before too. You can't actually contain all of that information. So it's upsetting that you knew it at one point and forgot, right? It's also upsetting that you don't get to experience that anymore.
Yeah, how about you, Heath? What do you think of like more interesting consequences for returning from the lands of the dead?
One of the ones we had was, and Brendan, I'm going to avoid using the word taint, is when we went to hell to rescue this guy. Two things happened. One, he had something come back with him that was a gift that just keeps on giving. Something that was midway between an unseen servant and an invisible stalker that he had to bargain with to help and not hinder when we were back on the prime material plane. But anything that happened to us in hell, like wounds or anything like that, although they could be healed, the scar was hideous. And that was something that was when we were talking about not just the GP cost, talking D&D here, not just the GP or the XP cost of bringing someone back. That was actually, and it was that even if you polymorphed or alter self or anything like that, you could still see those scars if they were visible. Say a hook horror or something got you across the cheek, you can make yourself turn from a human to an elf to a bugbear to a gnoll to a pseudo-dragon. You'd still have this horrible scar across your cheek. And that was one of the costs, and that actually that was something like, if we're going into battle, make sure they aim for your chest. Don't avoid the head, avoid the hands.
Yeah, and physical consequences in your material plane are also fun. A lot of resurrection spells in literature require a living sacrifice, right? So a life for a life, that's a very, very common theme. I'm sure Game of Thrones fans are familiar with that one. They do that one a couple of times. So, you kill someone. If someone dies and you want to save them, then you're going to have to sacrifice something living in order to do that. Usually in a game, I'll let you go. I'll be real quick, Heath. Usually in a game, what you end up needing to do, because players are real assholes and they'll just sacrifice whoever they can find, is either you have to make the sacrifice on a large enough scale that they might care, or it needs to be somebody they care about.
Or sometimes, yeah, I'll do it. I'll make it. There's very specific requirements, like it has to be somebody born under the same astrological signs and
Yep.
conjunctions.
Yep.
Make it so that it can't be just anybody. They got to put
Right.
work into
Right.
it. Heath,
Well, we've
you
got
had a
this
comment.
orc that we tied up. We didn't coup de grace him yet. Does that work? No.
Heath, you had a comment.
I could see the notice on the pinboard. Love adventure? We're looking for you. This way. Resurrection spells, true resurrection, raise dead, whatever. Especially something like true resurrection. I reckon it needs to be done like a wish. I've very, very, very rarely DM'd or GM'd any games, but if I ever do, and there was a point where someone needed to come back from the dead, I'd make the players word to the priest or whoever, or if one of the characters who's high enough to do it, word it really, really well. Because like a wish, like you're saying about Game of Thrones, Ms. whatever her name is, brings back Khal Drogo, but it's not Khal Drogo. He's alive, but he's not alive.
Right.
So, I think something like a resurrection spell or something. Another trip up is perhaps getting either the player performing the spell or talking to the cleric, priest, whoever. They need to be very specific on how you can say we need him brought back from the dead. Cool, here he is. That's a chicken, but it's your companion. You talk to him, he'll nod at you.
Yeah, and that's actually a whole other issue. Actually, I think we're just going to have to finally do a show about resurrection. We seem to have a lot of things to say related to that topic.
Well, and so many religions cover returning from the dead in so many different ways. We really could fill up an entire show on it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
But I think that is a good place for us to end tonight. This has been an extended edition of D Infinity Live. But before we sign off, we'll go ahead and do our final thoughts about gaming in the afterlife, or whatever. If there's anything else you guys want to plug, and I guess we don't have Mike here to reserve multiple final words, so I'll go ahead and take care of that. I guess, for me, there's so much possibility for adventure in the afterlife, whether it's heaven or hell or any number of other states, that you really need to use it. But don't make your afterlife, generic. Think about who's supposed to go to this afterlife, and really model it off of that. Think of the culture that this afterlife is based on. I did a campaign ages ago, which I really ought to resurrect, where it was the main religion was founded in this seaport, and so everything in their religion was all sort of metaphors for sailing and fishing and things like that. And so their version of hell was you were tied up in weights and sunk to the bottom of the ocean, and their hell was a cold, dark realm where crabs and eels picked at you forever. And it was cool. It was like people they would die, they would expect fire, brimstone, and demons, and instead they got giant crabs and evil mer people. It was fantastic. So yeah, that's my final thought. Brendan, what is your final thought?
Well, yeah, definitely break the status quo with the afterlife, because you don't have to stick to any physical rules, because it's not a physical plane. But so my final thought on the afterlife. If you're asking yourself where episodes of D Infinity Live go when they die, they are all in archive. You can call it purgatory if you like, on d-infinity.net. There's a link on the side. It's got this video where you can see the most recent episode. If you click on the text that says live ! That's where every single episode is in archive for you to watch and enjoy. So you'll make each one of those episodes a lot happier and ease its suffering a little bit if you spend a little bit of time with it.
Very cool. And as our guest tonight, Heath, will give you the final thought.
Do I take Mike's finals as well, or?
Yeah, you can take both of his. You can take both of his allotted ration of final thoughts.
I don't have the hat on. It's all right. We'll get through this. Final thoughts. Okay, channeling Mike with Skirmisher, and back to me. Sort of my input into Lives of Coast. Keep an eye out for it. It'll be coming as as quickly as possible, as Mike is wont to say. I think he uses more letters than that, but we won't.
As soon as motherfucking possible, I'll go there for you, Heath. That's the word. That's when Lives of Coast is supposed to come. I've got some bios in there too, and I think so as Will. And
Indeed.
it's a fun one. Sorry to interrupt your last thought.
No, that's all right. No. Yes, and keeping under the thread of going to hell, pick up Skirmish Necropolis and read up Return to the Necropolis. Still channeling Mike here. Hecaton, pick up Hecaton, give it a read. Good stuff. All central around this Necropolis. But for my own thoughts, anyone who's watched before and seen me on here, it's all about balance. And I know it's going to hell, and it might not be as balanced as you'd like. The GM's going to throw some wild stuff at you. It's still going to be fun. That's the big thing. Even though your characters are in hell rescuing someone, and you're going to have all sorts of crazy things thrown at you, it's still going to be balanced. But yeah, balance is the key. Even in hell, balance is the key.
There you go.
All right. Well, for myself, William T. Thrasher, for Brendan Cass, for our special guest, Heath, and for the gone but not forgotten Richard T. Balsley and Michael Jolly Varhola, this has been yet another episode of D Infinity. We will see you for another live broadcast next week. And we'll see you in hell. Looking down from heaven.